So when I was 7 years old, I was absolutely fearless. I was the kid that had mud on his brand new clothes. I probably had blood on my face, and I was smiling about it. And I think I was probably, to a certain degree, a lot to handle. Keep in mind, I was the youngest of four. I'm the baby boy. I have 3 older sisters. And my mother actually sent out a Christmas card when I was a 2nd grader. And it said to our friends and family, you know, the family's great, Ward's doing really well. If he was our first child, our family might be a little bit smaller. Now, life was idyllic at that age, but as life is wont to do, it moved on. And I think I kind of lost, to a certain degree, some of that spark, that real authentic excitement that was in me. And it's because I did what most of us do. I built up my walls. I became invulnerable. I didn't trust my instinct. And most importantly, I was searching for some type of balance. And it all started when I was a freshman in high school. I was pulled from my 3rd period math class, and the principal said, "Ward, I need you to get your things. There's an emergency." And I just looked him in the eye, and I knew. I said, "It's my father. Is he okay?" And he said, "No, Ward. Your father's dead." And I remember just the adrenaline coursing through my system. We walked down the hallway. It was a gorgeous, crystal clear September day. And all I could think of was, I've lost part of my family. We went home, and my friends were pulled from class. And at the end of the day, after spending time with us, they said, "You know, Ward, we've got to go. It's time for football practice." And I thought to myself, my God, football practice, I completely forgot about that. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go cry somewhere? Should I be with my family? How am I supposed to perform for my team? Essentially, it was a 15-year-old saying, what are my key performance indicators in the wake of death? And I went to football practice that day, and I put on my pads. And it's the first memory I have of making a decision completely invulnerably. No emotion entered that decision. I put on my armor, literally and figuratively. And I don't think it came off for probably the next 20 years. Now, life moved on. I went on to college, and my mother was the rock of the family. She could face anything. She was a classic 50s gal. She could do it with perfect lipstick and a really cheery wit. And she called me my junior year, and she said, "Hey, Ward, I just want to check in. How are your friends? How are your classes doing? You know, I just wanted to let you know I have breast cancer, but you don't need to worry much about it." A week after being graduated, we found out it had metastasized and had gone to her brain, and we buried her 7 months later. And at that moment, our family was completely dismasted. We probably should have repaired sibling rivalries. We had no idea how. And again, I started reaching outward. I was like, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to perform? What are my KPIs in the wake of this death? And I was told, Ward, put your feet on the ground. You need to create some kind of balance for yourself. Go out, get a job. But my life was anything but balance. I had no idea what balance was, and all I could feel was shame. I didn't know how to do that. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I ran. I spent the next year driving around the country. I moved to Austria, then I moved to Germany. My family scattered. My sisters went to England, to Australia, to the East Coast. We sold our family home. I had lost my home and my family. 2 years later, I came back to the Bay Area, and again, I reached out. What am I supposed to do now? Who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to perform? What are my KPIs at this point in life? Now, my instinct was to go back to university. It's where I'd been happiest. Get any higher degree, just go back to where I was happy. But my friend said, Ward, you've got to grow up at some point. Go out, start your career. So I didn't listen to my instinct. And that's how I built the next 8 years. I joined the workforce, and I did it on 3 principles. Be invulnerable, don't trust your instinct, and try to find that mythical work-life balance. And I realized that's exactly what was strangling me. I had it exactly opposite the lessons I was supposed to learn. Because in my heart, I built a new home. I built a new family with the love of my life. And I lost her too, because I was completely invulnerable. Every one of us here has lost somebody they loved because of the walls we build. And I realized then we have Peter Pan completely misinterpreted. Peter Pan is not a story about a boy that needs to grow up. It's more of an allegory. We need to listen to the Lost Boys in Tinker Bell telling us, Peter, just remember what it was like. Remember what it was like when you knew how to fly. And essentially, the message I took from that is, can we remember what it was like before we knew what life could throw at us? And in executive coaching and in leadership development, I can't tell you how frequently we hear some version of, if I had known how hard that was, I never would have done it. And that's coming from the creators, probably, of the apps that are currently in your pockets. If I'd known how hard it was. Whereas the second grader, the truest version of who we were, they would say, why not? They live according to what if? Life's an adventure. With some of the people I coach, I hear it so frequently, that's just not going to work in my organization. Politically, that idea, it's not going to fly. Whereas the second grader will put on a Superman cape, and they quite literally think they can fly off of the roof of the garage. I'm actually acquainted with the founder of a fund up in San Francisco, and it's a running joke amongst my friends. Every time I see this gentleman, they always say to me, well, we'll see how awkward tonight's conversation is going to be. And this guy, it's so frustrating. He's such an incredible communicator, and I like to think I'm reasonably deft at communicating. And whenever we get together, we just blink at each other. We have no idea what to talk about. And I realize it's because I'm looking for vulnerability. And he's so good at building up his walls. And probably the 10th time we met, he asked me for the 10th time, Ward, tell me again, what is it that you do? And I was like, well, I do leadership development. And he said, well, I'm just curious, what's the most common challenge you see leaders running into? And the only thing that came to my mind was fear. I just said, they're all afraid. And he did a double take and looked at me. And I feel like it was the first time he looked at me. And he said, what do you do about that fear? And I realized that, behind that veneer, this guy at the apex of his career, he was afraid too. And I'm not saying that we all don't have adult constraints. I want you to get rid of invulnerability and be more vulnerable. I want you to set aside logic and develop your instinct. I want you to throw work-life balance right out the window. But we've got constraints. We have mortgages. We want to send our kids to school. We want to pursue our dreams in our career and maybe come to terms with our past. I understand that, and it's incredibly frightening. And that's the real challenge that we have to engage. So I'm thinking about my own life at this point. It's not balanced at all. So on one day I might coach an executive. The next day I'll ride a horse. The next day I might put together a keynote presentation. The next day I might go shooting, and then I can put together a PowerPoint. It's exhausting. There's no balance there whatsoever, but it's true to my instinct. It makes me happy because it's true to my truest self, that second grader in me that I had denied for so long. It makes me think about the words of one of the leading psychoanalytic philosophers today, James Hollis. And he says, one of the things that's so frightening about vulnerability and trusting your instinct is that it challenges our myths. The myth of health, the myth of wealth, power, money, long life. He says people pursue the myth of long life. Then he asks the question, great, long life in the service of what virtue? And I would say the second graders in us, when we were at play, that was our own form of worship before we had a binding covenant and a binding philosophy. Just being vulnerable and seeing life as an adventure, that was its own virtue. And so I'm not saying throw reason right out the window. I think about the academic Alan Watts, who said that deciding is just the hesitation before the choice. So I couldn't stop you if I tried in your career decisions or in your family decisions to not make your pro-con list and bring all the data you need to bear. But what he was really saying is, for any choice you make, you can bring an infinite set of data to bear. At some point, instinct takes over, and you say, I've got enough. Now I've got to choose. I would say instinct is making more of our choices than our rational minds. And so this is what I want all of you to do today. By the end of today, my call to action, I want you to go home, or even do it now. Find a quiet space, get a piece of paper, and I want you to spend 15 minutes writing down everything you remember loving the most when you were a second grader, when you were your truest self. Between the age of 7 and 11, write down what you loved, what you were inspired by, what you wanted to be, what you dreamed about. Write it all down. Then put it in your desk and forget about it. And the next time you have a key decision in your life, whether it's in your careers or with your family or considering your future, it's all the same from my point of view. The next time you have that key decision to make, do all of your deciding, bring in all of the data that you're going to bring into it, and right before you make that choice, I want you to pull out that piece of paper. I want you to read through what your truest second grade self dreamed of. And then right before that choice, I want you to ask yourself, does what I'm choosing belong on this page? Thank you.